anything or ask anything or correct anything. And we'll jump in. Experience, not philosophy. Gosh, just the chapter titles alone get me excited. I love his ideas, the way that he puts them out there. There is something blasphemous in talking about how Buddhism is perfect as a philosophy or teaching without knowing what it actually is. Let me close my door real quick, just a moment. So, yes, this is a bad habit of people. You know, I one time got in trouble. I was a youth minister back in 1982. No, 1984. 1984, I was a youth minister for a small church in Texas. And I got really exasperated with my class of teenage students because they just didn't seem to ever do any of their assignments or anything. You know, church was just not this thing for them. And so one day I taught a class where I purposely taught them things that were not true. And trying to cause an argument, which I did, you know, because they would say, that's not true. I said, how do you know it's not true? And not one of them could point out in their Bibles why what I was saying was not true. And I scolded them and I told them, you see, this is why your faith is useless to you. I said, if you'd been born a monkey, you would have been a monkey. If you'd been born any other religion, you would have been that religion. It's like you have no inner discerning going on whatsoever. Anyway, I scolded them quite badly. Well, they got even with me because a couple of them went to the elders of the church and told that I had taught this class where I had taught these things. And I got called before the elders for teaching something that was wrong. And I explained to them the class. And of course, that was fine after that. But, you know, it's not enough just to coast on your family's religion. It's not just enough to coast on what you were raised with and just assume that it's the one and only or that it's the right or anything. This curiosity, this desire to know comes from within you, within each one of us. And so we should know why we think what we think. We should know why we suspect what we suspect to be true. And that it should be based on life experience and on inner wisdom and an inner knowing. It should be based on what's coming out of your practice and what's coming out of your guru. You know, these things should all work together. And so that's how religion is alive, is to have that kind of engagement with it, that kind of curiosity to know why and where and what to do. You know, that it's what makes it very enjoyable to read when you can learn little things that you pick up along the way that seem like they're sort of little individual pieces of information. And then you read something or you hear something from a teacher or in a lecture or from another tradition that just picks up a bunch of like 4 or 5 little things you've learned and gives them a cohesion, and you get a new concept, a new idea of like, oh my gosh, that's what that is. And it's even better when it comes from your practice. You know, when you experience some of this truth in your practice, you're like, oh my gosh, it takes it instantly deeper within you and wakes up, some slumber in there. It gets those clarity, gives you clarity in the mind, gives you a real feeling of like, wow, this is amazing stuff. This is amazing stuff. And so that's the thing. Know what you're doing in your practice. Know what your ideal is. Know what your philosophy is. Know that it's just a philosophy, but know about it and use it to be helpful, because that's its only value, is taking us forward. All right, so he says, although there are many people in this country who are interested in Buddhism, Few of them are interested in its pure form. See what he means by that. Most of them are interested in studying the technique, the teaching, or the philosophy of Buddhism. Comparing it to other religions, they appreciate how satisfying Buddhism is intellectually. But whether Buddhism is philosophically deep or good or perfect is not the point. To keep our practice in its pure form is our purpose. Sometimes I feel there's something blasphemous in talking about how Buddhism is perfect as a philosophy or teaching without knowing what it actually is. That's very true. They would know that they were Vedantists, and then what? I'm teasing if anybody got offended by that anywhere now or after the recording. But yeah, so it's the same thing within each of our religions. If we get caught up in the philosophy and the delight of the intellectual perfection of it, or the appreciation of it, which is very easy to do in Vedanta in particular, but every religion, everybody that adheres to a religion has these ideas about how perfect that religion is. I remember being told that the reason that Christianity was the one true religion was because it contained all of the truths. Like Hinduism had one pillar of the temple, and Islam would have another pillar of the temple, and some other, but Christianity was the only religion that had all the pillars. And so these biases, they creep in. I now even feel this way about the Vedanta. The Vedanta has all paths incorporated, and it's kind of become a thing for me to see that and to recognize that as I delve into other scriptures. But this is not the point. This is not why the philosophy is there. The philosophy reaches its perfection, its manifestation in you, in your experience of life, not just in your realization, but in your experience of being, your ising, your way through life. This is where the power of religion manifests. And if we could remember that and really focus on that, religion would be in a much healthier state for us. Because people who are doing that are less inclined to be so sure of their rightness and to be so willing to fight or argue about things, philosophical and intellectual things, academic things. And religion has to remain alive. It has to remain vivid and dynamic, and it should affect your life thusly, for a good academic word. It should affect your life thusly. To practice Zazen with a group is the most important thing for Buddhism and for us, because this practice is the original way of life. And this is the idea of holy company. And Thakur also would agree with this. This is an extremely important thing to do, to get together with others. In Christianity, Jesus says, where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am also. And so, when Ramakrishna was Jesus, he said that teaching. And so now we can know that teaching is true too. So whenever two or more of us get together to practice together, Thakur is there as well. Mother's there as well. Jesus is there as well. And we can see these things in Thakur and Vivekananda's life. Buddha shows up at one point. Jesus shows up at another point in actual visions of these greats while they're doing their practice. And you can know that that's true for you, but you haven't cleared the vision to appreciate their company. That's the thing. So this is how religion should be. It's practiced together, all of us together, encouraging each other, strengthening each other, not gossiping about each other, not judging each other, not keeping track of who's up to what, but in an encouraging way. We look for light in each other. We look for the best in each other, and we fan those flames. That's Sangha. That's a Sangha that you can take refuge in. Gossipy Sanghas are not good places for refuge. They're, not a good place, which is why we shouldn't engage in that. So this practice of the original way, practicing a religion for its manifestation within yourself, keeping that your focus and that your joy, not the intellectual and philosophical aspects of it, and to make it a part of the life of with you and the people around you, creating holy company by getting together and reading a scripture or two, even if you're getting together with someone informally. How, of course, it'd be really weird, but it'd be a delightful weird if before going to the movie you say, hey Mohan, why don't let's just read for 10 minutes before we go out to dinner, you know like that. And or keep the books by your bed. When you wake up in the middle of the night, pick up that book and take a read on your own, to keep the mind in the right place. Or carry a small, I knew, like Vivekananda used to carry the Gita and the Imitation of Christ with him everywhere he went. You should always have a holy scripture with you. So if you're in the dentist office, waiting in terror for your treatment, you can read a scripture, something like that. Without knowing the origin of things, we cannot appreciate the result of our life's effort. Our effort must have some meaning. To find the meaning of our effort is to find the original source of our effort. We should not be concerned about the result of our effort before we know its origin. If the origin is not clear and pure, our effort will not be pure, and its result not satisfying for us. When we resume our original nature and incessantly make our effort from this base, we will appreciate the result of our effort moment after moment, day after day, year after year. This is how we should appreciate our life. Those who are attached only to the result of their effort will not have any chance to appreciate it, because the result will never come. But if moment by moment your effort arises from its pure origin, all you do will be good, and you will be satisfied with whatever you do. Well, then he's taking quite a leap there, because he's talking about the realized soul, the realized mind. The origin, of course, is the divine presence in you. And the truth of it is that you're not the doer, that you're not practicing. And so to know that source is to know yourself as the instrument of the beloved. And for you to be that instrument of the beloved means that you have attained that silence of mind, to where you can hear the origin, you can hear the initial prompting for these things. You can realize the presence and action of the divine within you at that point. And so it's the source and not the result of our religion that's important. I love that perspective, actually. It's a new one for me. Even though I read this book before, that didn't strike me. But that's an interesting idea, that it's the source of our religion that is interesting, not the results of it. Because the results, if done properly, take you to the origin, take you to the self, to what you have always been, to what you will always be. So this is quite a beautiful notion, quite a change in thinking, really, to see that. We always see things as process going forward in some way. But in religion, that's truly not happening. We're going back to a purity that we lost, that we gave up for something else at some point. What a nice idea. Zazen practice is the practice in which we resume our pure way of life. Yes, that pure way of life is a way of life with no me and mine in it. It's a life in quiet, in a quiet inner peace where each action is inspired, in a visible dance with the divine, with the universe, with the natural order of things, as it were. So that wonderful listening that we nurture inside, listening to the sound of God's name, listening to the presence of love, listening to the presence of the beloved, the divine, and all of those promptings, becoming aware of a mind so that we can see its machinery and understand it to be a machine, that we are not that. We are the user of that, the observer of that, but we are not that. That's resuming our pure way of life. That's a life of integration, a life where you understand the harmony with which you are called to live with the world around you, with the people around you, the conditions around you. You know, like the tree I was talking about. I was talking before we started about dead trees becoming kind of a not a passion, that's way overstated, but a deep appreciation of mine. I love to go into the desert and find these old junipers and these old pine trees that's their life was nothing but struggle trying to grow yourself as a tree in the middle of a desert. But the markings of their life are all there, the markings of the harmony that they're called to, the surrender. You know, just sit and ponder a tree for a lesson in surrender, for a lesson in harmony, for a lesson in oneness. Study a tree. It does nothing of its own accord. It simply accepts fully where it's planted, where it survives, and out of everything that is, it grows, it manifests. You know, it's of course never concerned about moving because it's never going to move. You know, and so it's you know, it doesn't sit and wonder about its purpose because it can't do anything for a purpose. It's stationary. It's a tree. And so to ponder this might seem like an odd thing, but there's some wonderful, wonderful scripture that can come from these kinds of observances in the world around us. And that's where the scriptures came from. You know, they came from the moment, the same moment we're sitting in. So it's good to become a sage, become a hearer, silence your mind so that you can dip your ladle into that peace that passes understanding and pull out wisdom direct from the source. That's what he's pointing out. No longer from the written philosophies, no longer drinking from the ladles of others, but actually doing the practice and purifying your mind so that you can dip your own ladle in and get you know, fresh, spontaneous wisdom teachings from the original scripture, which is the moment, this isness, from which all of this has been condensed, all of these teachings. And so real religion is coming to that point where you live in a scripture, where you walk in a scripture, and you are astute at being able to read it and see it and recognize it and discern it everywhere. That this is ongoing, and this is what life really is. This is when living gets beautiful. When you can look at the mountain and you hear the teachings in a mountain, you can watch the sunset, all these cliche beauties, but each one of them, there are things to be learned. Watching the waves relentlessly beat on the shore, what wisdom can be woken up just by watching that? A delicate flower in the desert being able to grow and bloom and present such a beauty for just a day, literally some of them just a day. And who will appreciate that beauty? You know, so you see God alive and playing and sporting everywhere, always dripping with wisdom, with satisfying understanding. So he's saying Zazen practice is a practice in which we resume our pure way of life, that way of living, that way of seeing, beyond any gaining idea. Yes, because we know the nature of things. How many times, and yet, you know, again and again, we just keep forgetting. There's nothing for you in this world. That's not a sad thing at all. That's a freeing thing, because you realize death is not an ending. It's a blooming, as it were. It's the seed dying and a new plant sprouting, you know, carrying on as it grows. This pure, without any gaining idea, because there's nothing wrong. The only thing is that the truth is covered in us. We're distracted from our nature, and we've been pulled way out of our center. And so to live in this pure way of life is finding our way back to Eden, finding our way back to our inner paradise, to that delight within. beyond any gaining idea, and beyond fame and beyond profit. The same thing. Nothing can be added to you. Your nature is spirit. Your nature is not a body. It's not your mind. Your nature is spirit, and spirit is infinite, has no boundaries, no limitations. And so spirit, is self-satisfied, self-originating. And so this is our pure nature. This is where we want to sit. This is where we practice from, right? It's our faith in these things that establish us in it when we sit down to do our practice. And then through our practice, which purifies the mind naturally from the presence of the divine within us, that divine spark. And then through that purity, we become to experience, return to the experience of being, return to what we are, to what we've always been. By practice, we just keep our original nature as it is, because it can't be changed, actually. It's not that we choose to keep it as it is, like you can change it. You can't change it because it's the immortal, immovable, unchangeable self. It's that part of us which sits in perfect satisfaction, perfect contentment, perfect bliss, needing nothing, wanting nothing, lacking nothing. There is no need to intellectualize about what our pure original nature is, because it is beyond our intellectual understanding and actually manifests when that noise of analysis disappears, right? We're very accustomed, and we've talked about this many times, whenever we want to know something, we go to the mind for it. We go to an external thing for it. We go to the thing itself and study the thing itself. This is how we get knowledge, but it's worldly knowledge. Anytime you're studying an external object, it's a worldly knowledge. And the different thing about spiritual life, and the reason that our practice is so odd and so different, is because this is the first time that you're going to have to learn how to study something without objectifying it. That's not an obvious thing to do. It's apparently a very simple thing to do, but it requires an absolute originality, a creativity that may not be very well practiced. To give you an idea of what we're trying to do, I had an art teacher in 8th grade. She had a tire that she set up on her desk, a car tire. And she said, okay, tonight's homework, I want each of you to write me a usage for this tire that you have never seen before. What's something that we could use this tire for that we've never seen it used for before? So that was our homework. And I thought, oh, that'll be so simple. My God, that was one of the hardest things of homework I ever had to do, because your mind doesn't work that way. Your mind is based entirely off of the past. The creativity of the mind, it can't come up with an original thought. It's always the product of previous thoughts. And so to sit there and stare at a tire and try to think of something that you could use a tire for that is original, that has not been seen before, is phenomenal. And you'll see this like in modern art sometimes, when I first saw this or got this idea from the study of art, it wasn't until I was a senior in college, but I took a class on art history. And, there's an artist named Yves Klein, and one of his paintings hangs in the MoMA in New York. And it's simply probably like a 3x5 foot canvas, something of that size. And it's just painted blue, just a solid color of blue. There's no detail in it. The brushwork is done so smoothly, you can't detect brushwork. It's just a perfectly blue piece of canvas. And of course, anybody who hasn't had an art history class is going to walk in there and look at this thing and be like, why is this here? This took no talent to do, because you're not understanding. He was the first to do it. And if you don't think that's a big deal, imagine yourself being able to paint a canvas just a solid color of blue and to think you have something. So much so that you carry that canvas of blue to an art gallery and you show them look, I painted this canvas blue. And you expect them to accept it as a piece of art. Think about that. That's what it is to be first. That's what it is to be original. And we have to do something within our own context very similar to realize God, because we have to give up every notion that we have about how to learn it or how to do it or what needs to be done, because all of those dictums come from our habit of learning in a worldly way. We're not learning something new. We're trying to see something ancient, something that has been here for every life that we've lived. And it's taking something that has to be learned about something that cannot be objectified. You have to learn of yourself. Who am I? But who are you going to ask who you are? So why would you go to a mind and ask who am I? What you have to do is stop all wondering and all thinking and all questioning about who you are and experience who you are in that silence. It will be obvious to you what you are. It will be clear to you what you are, because you are that. You are that. But you see, we're breaking every rule about how to learn. And we're having to figure out something that cannot be described, a method of learning that cannot be written down, because it does not belong to the category of knowledge, of relational knowledge, knowledge within time, knowledge within causation. It's not of that. And so we're being asked to do something completely original. And that's why this is so difficult for us, because it's the one thing to learn that has its own method, that's not a method, its own principle to learn, right? And so this is the thing. And it's going to be very similar to taking your blue canvas to the art gallery. When you do realize it, it's going to be such a simple thing, but it's going to revolutionize you so deeply. You're going to know this is something, even though it's, such a simple thing. And so you'll carry your blue canvas to the gallery and convince them to put it there. And then next thing you know, the MoMA is calling and wants your blue painting hanging there, because you were the first. You were the original. So there is no need to intellectualize about what our pure original nature is, right? That's exactly what we just finished talking about there. Because it is beyond our intellectual understanding. Beyond meaning it can't be held in, the mind needs things presented in a certain way. First of all, through the senses. This experience is sensual. It's non-sexual too. It's a non-sensual experience. It's a direct experience. It's not going to come through the organs and instruments of perception. It's going to come in from a very surprising place. You're going to find it right next to the self of the self, the most intimate and pure thing you've ever heard or experienced. With it will come all the knowledge necessary to understand it. There's no study, there's no memorization, there's no mapping out, there's nothing. Once you become aware, you will know fully and completely, because that's how direct experience is. There's none of this piecemeal of feeding it through sense organs like we are accustomed to, memorizing little bits, tying them together later. It has nothing to do with that whole process. So it can't be held in the mind, because it's not relational. It's not related to anything else. It can't be held in the mind because it's not causal. It cannot be attained. And so the mind cannot conceive of it. The idea that it's a one without a second, it's a knowledge that has no other. The mind is a relational device. It cannot handle information or knowledge that is not relational. One without a second, the mind cannot even conceive of that. It will produce instantly the idea of a separate one that's unique and huge, but it won't be able to get rid of its self-identity, its ego, in order to truly be able to understand what one without a second means. So this is what he's saying. It is this original nature, and it's beyond intellectual understanding. There is no need to appreciate it because it is beyond our appreciation. Because if you're appreciating it, you've objectified it. If you've objectified it, you've separated yourself from it. If you're separate from it, you're not that. And you have not discovered anything about yourself. You see, it's a very interesting predicament. It's delightful, actually, because there's laughter all around it. You know, it's a team of people trying to figure out a great joke. And this is what we do. And each time you get near the joke, it becomes funnier and a little bit more elusive and a little bit more fascinating. And this is where our longing grows, and where our delight grows, and where our desire for the beloved grows, is in this practice of studying this thing which somehow need not be studied and yet must be studied to come to an understanding that isn't quite an understanding, but yet somehow is an understanding, to know who we are, which should be obvious, but for some reason isn't apparent. So just sit, he says. So just sit, without any idea of gain. So don't think about what you're trying to accomplish. Don't give your practice a purpose. Just sit in stillness. If you create a purpose, you'll run after it. If you're running after it, you won't be in the moment. You won't be with the divine. So just sit. There's no purpose, no point. Just sit. Don't think of any gain to become from it. And with the purest intention is just pure surrender, pure openness, pure vulnerability, a pure willingness to respond to what the moment presents. To remain as quiet as our original nature, right? To call it quiet would be an understatement. It's a peace that passes all understanding. There is such a profound stillness at the center of our being, the center of our self, the self itself. Such a profound silence. It's the silence that we recognize in ancient temples or ancient forests. You know, it's a silence that's inherent in us. And it's greater than any of that we've experienced. You know, I remember the first time my mother came to see the old temple. I took her down there to show her. And she walked in, and she was in there just a couple of minutes, and she turned to me and she says, "My God, it is so still in here." You know, so absolutely quiet. And that will be the same thing that we discover within our own shrine. You made the temples holy. You made the temples still and gave them their atmosphere from that shrine within you. And that silence is in you now at this moment. That intense peace is at your center at this moment. But the nature of peace is that it's silent, unmoving. It's not going to come get you. It's not going to catch your attention. It's only found in the absence of the particular, in the absence of a goal, the absence of a story. It's only in that absolute stillness. It's the one fruit of true surrender. To remain as quiet as our original nature. This is our practice. In the Zendo, there is nothing fancy. We just come and sit. After communicating with each other, we go home and resume our own everyday activity as a continuity of our pure practice, enjoying our true way of life. This is a profound thing. You know, when you touch that silence, you carry that silence. That's why, you know, you're the swamis that we respect so much. You know, the swamis that we respect so much, because they have that presence. You know, Swami Sridharananda, when he said a word, that word came out of him and just punched you. I mean, it was a direct influence. You know, Swami Prabhutananda, there could be a room full of 20 men talking about football and laughing and joking about it. And Swami would walk into that room, and without any announcement, without any effort on his part, that room immediately would quiet into a stillness. because he carried it with him. He lived in that space. That's what we're called to do, to find our nature, which is that purest of temples within, the purest of silences, the most holy sacredness of a presence that lies at the center of us, behind the thoughts, behind the mind, in this pure peace. If you can put your foot there, if you can establish just a toehold there and walk through this world with that knowledge of that presence within, nothing touches you. Nothing can bother you. Nothing can upset you or anger you. You know, it's such a pure space of being. And so we sit to allow it, not to find it, but to allow it. We sit not to hear it, but to be absorbed in it, to be inundated in it. Rasgola and syrup. The syrup and the rasgola don't remain separate. The syrup permeates the rasgola. And this is how we sit in that silence, in that presence of God. It doesn't remain separate from us. It inundates us, becomes a part of us. And we operate from silence, in a pure way of living, our original way of being. We must come and sit. We just come and sit. After communicating with each other, we go home and resume our own everyday activity as a continuity of our pure practice, enjoying our true way of life, enjoying this inner silence, enjoying this surrender to the divine will, being harmonious in our obedience to the moment, to isness. Yet, this is very unusual. Wherever I go, people ask me, "What is Buddhism?" with their notebooks ready to write down my answer. You can imagine how I feel. because if you're starting that way, you see, and this is why we emphasize this over and over again, because it's so habitual and so deeply ingrained into us that I bet even today when we go sit for our next practice, we're going to be result oriented. We're going to be goal driven in it. I'm doing this to realize God. I'm doing this to, purify my mind. I'm doing this to whatever. And it's like, if you go in chasing something, you're going to miss the thing you're looking for. Because the thing you're looking for only makes itself apparent when you're not chasing anything, when you're not needing anything, when you're not thinking about anything. You've simply turned everything about yourself into a gigantic ear. And you're just listening to the universe. Your mind is no longer an organ of action and thought. It's an organ of silence that can catch the fireflies of thought as they go by, capture them, observe them, and let them go. Capture them, observe them, and let them go. Unchanged, untouched, steady, strong. But that whole self turning into an ear at the feet of the beloved, to intuit a pure love, to intuit something unimaginable, like an unconditioned love, to fill ourselves with something that could never be absorbed, the infinity and immortality of our being. This is where we sit, and this is from where we live. You don't have to wait until the body dies to enjoy your immortality. Your immortality is yours now. It doesn't begin at some point in the future. It has already begun. You're in the midst of your immortal life, your infinite existence. Think that way. Know that to be true, and find how much freedom is in that. Find how much strength and boldness is in that. What a wonder, just knowing that is. So people ask me, what is Buddhism, with their notebooks ready to write down my answer. You can imagine how I feel. But here we just practice Zazen. That's all we do. And we are happy in this practice, just for its own sake. We're happy not for a reason. You see, bliss is your nature. This is one of the things, this is one of the humorous reasons for grace, because your mind will not let you be happy without a reason. Your mind will demand a reason. You're not allowed. If you're in a depressed mood and you just decide to be happy, your mind will not buy into it. It'll be like, but we need reasons for being happy. That's your karma acting on you. You know, that's your samskaras acting on you, because you are in fact happy for no reason. You are in fact Satchitananda. You are blissful for no reason. And so you have to get off of that reason train, that cause and effect train, because those are imaginary. Every cause is an effect, and every effect is a cause. And realization is the one effect with no cause. So that's a deep, deep, deep truth to ponder. If you're trying to attain something that has no cause, how exactly are you trying to attain it? What are you using as a cause for something that has no cause? You see, that's the puzzle. That's right back to where we started. That is why this practice, this realization seems so difficult, is that we have to do some one thing, or something has to occur that doesn't occur from reason, doesn't occur from cause. It's an original, and it has to be touched in a way that you've never done before, a new way. And what that is, well, he just told us. Just sit. Just sit and enjoy it. Enjoy your sit for no reason. Just be in the presence, and let that be enough. Don't try and gather for anything more. Don't try to add anything more. Let it be enough. And that's your practice, letting it be enough. And grace is the key, because you're going to have to unlock your mind somehow. You're going to have to make your mind give you permission to let go of all of its stories, all of its worldly knowledge, all of its self that it's decided about itself. All that has to go. And the only way you can convince your mind to let go of those things is to give it something else. Grace. That instant neutralizer of karma. But here we just practice Zazen. That's all we do. And we are happy in this practice. For us, there is no need to understand what Zen is. We are practicing Zazen. So for us, there is no need to know what Zen is intellectually. This is, I think, very unusual for American society. Indeed, extremely unusual, right? But it's the key. He's saying something very profound here. It would be good to sit and think about this on our own, in silence. Just let it roll around. That's all. In America, there are many patterns of life and many religions. So it may seem quite natural to talk about the differences between the various religions and compare one with the other. But for us, there's no need to compare Buddhism to Christianity. Buddhism is Buddhism, and Buddhism is our practice. We do not even know what we are doing when we just practice with a pure mind. Indeed. That's a very important teaching right there, because if you don't know what you're doing, which we don't, we don't know what we're doing. And so if we don't know what we're doing, why are we judging the value of our practice? Right? Why do we get up and say, oh, that was a great meditation? How do you know what a great meditation was? Remember I had that conversation with one of my first gurus, my friend Philip. I was in the shrine, and it was the early days, and my mind was thinking of things and getting lost in things that mind shouldn't get lost in, especially in a shrine. So I walked out of that shrine so embarrassed, and I was telling Philip, I was like, God, I don't even think I should go in the shrine to do my practice anymore. And it's so bad. I'm just, my mind is so all over the place, and I just can't sit before God like that. And boy, did he scold me. Says, what? Who are you to judge your practice? He says, only an enlightened person can judge a practice, can know whether a meditation was good or not. He said, because you have no idea what Mother was doing during that practice. You were up here fighting your demons and playing in your imagined world, and you thought you were having a terrible practice. But Mother was down here, clicking a switch that's going to give you an experience of deep and lasting bliss in 8 years from now. But you're not aware of that. You're not silent enough to know that within. So this could have been the greatest practice time of your life, where Mother successfully clicked a switch that's going to manifest as your enlightenment 8 years in the future, perhaps. And you knew nothing of it. And you say that you had a bad meditation. So don't judge your meditation. Your responsibility is to be earnest and sincere. Don't judge that. Just be that. If you start judging your own sincerity and your own earnestness, that's a never-ending ball of self-hatred. So don't go there. Trust yourself to be sincere. Trust yourself to be earnest, and to sit in your practice and do it and enjoy. Sit in your practice and enjoy. Enjoy what? You're asking for reasons, are you? Just enjoy. Be there. Be present. We do not even know what we are doing. We just practice with a pure mind. So we cannot compare our way to some other religion. This is why it's so important to see these things, to this whole notion of sitting for the source and not for the result that he started with today. If all religions did that, we all have the same source. Every religion says we have the same source, that we are that image of God, we are the divine, we are the beloved. In different ways of describing that, but that's the one truth. That's our source. If we were all enamored of that source instead of the result, what argument would there be? What argument could there be? We would all see that in each other. We would all recognize. Some people may say that Zen Buddhism is not religion. Maybe that is so. Or maybe Zen Buddhism is religion before religion. So it might not be religion in the usual sense, but it is wonderful. And even though we do not study what it is intellectually, even though we do not have any cathedral or fancy ornaments, it is possible to appreciate our original nature. This is, I think, quite unusual. Indeed. Very blessed is the man or woman who can enjoy what they have without the need for anything more. That's a challenge in life. I found out that if you're going to renounce, it doesn't matter where you draw the line. If you say, I'm never going to have cake again, that's going to be a hard line to manage. It's doable, absolutely, and it grows easier. But if you say, I'm only going to have one piece of cake every other day, that line is going to be just as difficult to maintain as saying I'm not going to have any cake. And even if you say I'm going to allow myself one whole cake every day, that line is going to be just as hard to maintain as the absolute renunciation. So don't become deluded. It's that story of the people on the beach, right? I had that dream. It's like if you go to the beach and you eat 1 tablespoon of sand, that's all you're going to ever need to know about what that beach is, about the nature of the beach, the sand. You're not going to have to discipline yourself not to eat any more sand. It's going to be quite a natural thing to not eat any more sand because you tasted it, you tried it, you discerned it, you looked at the whole process, you saw it clearly, and having 1 tablespoon of sand was enough to know that you don't have to desire to eat the whole beach. Now, this world is very much the same. Take 1 spoonful of this world in any form that you want and discern. Look closely at it, and there will be no need to have to discipline yourself not to want another one. It's like Thakur. He just did those things once, remember? He locked himself in a room full of sweets, found out their nature, never was struggled with it again. Had Mathur bring him that fancy shawl and put it around his head or his shoulders, and he felt it and realized it just caused ego. and he threw it on the ground and stomped on it, was going to burn it before Matur came and rescued it. You see, your nature is enough. This bliss within you is enough. This life is enough. And just sitting quietly with a sincere and earnest presence in it is enough. Mother is everywhere present, always perfect. The divine spirit fills everything. God is everywhere, always perfect. Different words from what the Buddhists will use, but the same ideal. It's that one without a second, because no second is needed, wanted, or necessary. It's freedom. And we enjoy that every time we sit. That is all. Anybody have a question or a concern? Story? All right.
Hello,
Maharaj?
Swami. See, I had
Yes.
a comment, or rather
Okay.
a suggestion. I was wondering, I know you've probably taught it before, but it's like, could you kind of take us through a meditation or something which has us experience it more rather than listens so much?
We could try something like that. We did that this last month's retreat. We did that. The trouble is with the guided meditation. Well, it's not trouble. Swami Prabhupada was never a big fan of them, but you can lead the mind. But see, we're not looking for an experience.
Okay.
That's the challenge in it. We can lead each other into an experience, an experience of some peace and some bliss and some niceness, internal niceness. But those are still just sensations, and you're still the observer watching those sensations. And if we define our practice by sensations, we're running down a dead end road. That's why Thakur was so concerned. He's like, just observe. Yes, so you saw light. Yes, so you saw shining symbols of mantras in your mind. Yes, so you saw this goddess or that goddess. Those are fine, but all of them are still experienced, which means you're still seeing yourself separate. You're still seeing another. And that's not where we're trying to go. So yes, we have those experiences. Yes, we see those things. Yes, they're there. Fine. Let them be there. Don't pay attention to them. They also are leading you out of your own fullness. They're introducing an idea of needing something else, something more. And so Thakur says, don't. Just let them arise, let them come, enjoy that presence, and let them go just as easily. Don't hold on. And so, in a guided meditation, we can get some very nice thoughts going. We can get the mind nice and quiet. And there's advantage to that. So yes, that we can do, definitely.
Maharaj, when we try to get off that reason train, so does that mean that we should not try to make a resolution? Like that's kind of a promise?
Well, it depends on where you're at. At some places in our practice, at some periods in our practice, resolutions are very important. If they weren't important, there would be no such thing as sannyas. So they are important for us, but they're not important. The resolutions in and of themselves are not the important thing. What's important is the resolutions are leading to a strengthening of willpower, a strengthening of our control over body, over mind, by the best, which ultimately leads us to the idea of not body, not mind, because it's our identity with body, mind that gives them control over us, because we think they're our own voice. And so we obey our own voice. But when we are able to sort out what our own voice is, the voice of spirit, not the voice of body and mind, then the inner guru is awake. And then, you know, that silence itself becomes the teacher. But yes, no, do your vows and try to accomplish them. And each failure will teach you more about grace and put you in a situation of needing to learn how to accept grace, which means reducing ego. So yes, in every way, they're valuable, but they're not the thing in and of itself. That's the
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you,
Liz,
Swamiji.
Surely. Are we all covered, Liz? Did you finish saying or what you were going to say?
I understand everything that you pointed out in terms of looking for an experience. And but however, I feel that our lives are so noisy that even if that once in a while, if we just sat and tried to meditate even for a full 45 minutes, we may stop looking. We may become even aware of what it means to stop looking. It's a subconscious thing for me. I think I understand that I do look, but I also kind of feel you have to stay silent longer, and we never force ourselves to stay silent ever. If anything, our lives are too busy.
No, it's true. What you're saying is true. That you know, while we're in this state of, we'll call it impurity. I don't like the weird connotation of that, but we'll call it impurity, where the noise is is the dominant thing. But you know, the solution that I have found in that is understanding that you wouldn't hear that noise if it wasn't silent within. Right? That the noise of the mind, you wouldn't recognize the noise of the mind if there wasn't silence behind it. You wouldn't recognize a busy mind if there wasn't stillness behind it. So use all of this recognition of noise and recognition of turmoil, recognition of change. Use them not to pay attention to that, you know, but to understand that on this side of the finger pointing at the noise, there has to be silence and there has to be stillness. Otherwise, we wouldn't be aware of the noise and disturbance of mind and world. So use it to imply your own silence, to make you aware intuitively, because you won't be able to turn that finger around. That finger is still going to be pointing outward. But the things that it's observing out here can only be seen because of the perfect screen behind, the stillness of the white screen behind the movie, the silence of the movie behind the soundtrack. That has to be there within you in order to see all of the things that we complain about being our problem. And that will show you how it can be that we don't have to attain anything. We have that. That's what's making us aware that we don't, or making us think that we don't, because we're living on the other end of our finger. But we have to intuitively live back here and say, see all this noise, I'm aware of this mind being noisy because I'm sitting in a place that is not noisy. Let my attention come to that instead of the noisy mind. And that might help all the way through the day if you can just keep that practice alive from minute to minute during the day, of catching yourself being distracted and understanding the nature of it. I'm being pulled out of what already is a silent, peaceful, unchanging place into a changing, and getting all concerned about the changing. But this silent place is what has allowed that changing to exist. You can't have one without the other. But learn to put your identity in that unchanging and experience your day from the peaceful place and not from the other end of the finger. So they go hand in hand, and one indicates the other. Just start paying attention to the one that we normally don't. Attention on attention.
Thank you.
Sure. All right.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Very good, everyone. Jai Ma, Jai everyone. Jai Thakur. Just Jai. Wonderful.
Thank you.